Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Tommy Ryba, Premier Board Member and President and CEO of El Camino Hospital in Mountain View, California.
Good morning. Morning. Good job, good job. So I'm Tommy Ryba, Premier Board Member and President and CEO of El Camino Hospital in Silicon Valley. Welcome back to the last day of the Premier 2013 Governance Education Conference. I hope you enjoyed the awards banquet last night. Wasn't it inspirational? Let's have one more round of applause for our Richard A. Norling Award winner, Texas Health Resource, and all of our CARE Award winners. It reminded us of why we do our work. We have a busy morning, so let's get into it right now with our first session on the economy. Our next speaker will provide his perspectives on where we are, where we're going, and how healthcare plays into the mix. He's a name you all know very well. Steve Forbes is chairman and editor-in-chief of Forbes Media, a family of print publications that reach a worldwide audience of more than 6 million readers, and Forbes.com and related sites, which average 25 million unique monthly visitors, just like our own websites. A widely respected economic prognosticator, Steve authors editorials for each issue of his flagship publication, Forbes, and is the only writer to have won the Crystal Owl Award 4 times, honoring the financial journalist whose yearly forecasts prove most accurate. In 1985, President Reagan named Steve chairman of the Bipartisan Board for International Broadcasting, where he oversaw the operation of Radio Free Europe and Radio Liberty. He was reappointed to the post by President George H.W. Bush and served until 1993. And then in both 1996 and 2000, Steve campaigned vigorously for the Republican nomination for the presidency. Key to his platform were a flat tax, medical savings accounts, a new Social Security system for working Americans, parental choice of schools for their children, term limits, and a strong national defense. What a great platform. Steve serves on many prestigious boards, including the Ronald Reagan Presidential Foundation, the Heritage Foundation, the Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, and the School of Public Policy at Pepperdine University. He previously served on the Board of Trustees of Princeton University. It's my personal pleasure to introduce to you Steve Forbes.
Well, thank you very much, Tommy, for those very kind words. Thank all of you for coming out this early in the morning to get some words, not of wisdom, but you will get words. It is a great pleasure to be here. What Premier is doing in terms of getting data, analyzing data, trying to enable systems, hospitals and systems to react and to improve themselves with that data is really where the future lies. As you know, the healthcare industry has a lot of parts to it which don't function as well as they should. And getting that kind of information, making it actionable and things like that are going to be absolutely critical. I'll be saying a few words about healthcare after discussing the economy. Healthcare is obviously 18% of the economy, and we in the media business think that we've been going through a tumultuous era, and we have. Our model of 150 years has been shattered. However, what's going to be happening and is happening, will be happening in healthcare in coming years, is going to be the turbulence and change is going to be on an even greater scale. So this is just beginning. The healthcare bill passed a couple of years ago. That is not the end of it. That is just the beginning. There's going to be considerable changes coming up in this year in 2014 and after, and changes that you wouldn't have even thought of are coming along. If I knew what they were exactly, I would be on the Forbes 400 list, but I'm trying to figure it out as well. Before getting to the economy, because I know it'll come up in the Q&A, I'd just like to make a few observations about the seemingly endless soap opera in Washington, D.C., the numerous battles that are taking place there. What's going to make it even more interesting, if this kind of stuff interests you, and you have to because it does affect us, sadly. It's not like a soap opera where you can turn it off easily. What you see in Washington is that the Republicans, slow learning party, but they're beginning to recognize that when they get in the ring with President Obama, they end up getting their jaw broken. And they keep doing the same thing. They did it in 2011, 2012. But finally, you can see signs that they're learning. On the question about what to do about the debt ceiling, a year and a half ago, they thought they could get major spending reductions enacted through the debt ceiling extension, and they lost politically. It looked like they're going to lose again on that issue, because all the president had to do, would be to say, well, we're going to have to cut or suspend Social Security payments. And that battle would have been over. Republicans would have had to cave, just as they did largely on the fiscal cliff debate. So they just said, we're going to extend it. All we ask in return is that the Senate pass a budget, which it hasn't done in 3.5 years. By law, they're supposed to. The reason the Senate does not like to pass budgets, because it means that members there have to vote on who gets how much money. And they like to avoid that kind of accountability. So the Republicans are waking up that issues like sequestration, where the cuts are automatic, there you have leverage. Because if nothing is done, those cuts go in. So you do have negotiating leverage. So that battle is just beginning. And you're also going to see Republicans finally go on offense instead of fighting just on the president's turf. For example, in a few months, I think you're going to see them proposing bills such as in the House of Representatives, such as you cannot use Medicare money to finance Obamacare. Now, that seems innocuous, get large public approval. Why raid Medicare for another health care plan? But the Democrats in the Senate know that Obamacare plans to use about $700 billion over the next 10 years to help finance Obamacare. So the Republicans can say, we're defending the integrity of Medicare. And they're going to love to see Harry Reid, who's the Democrat leader in the Senate, gag as he tries to put off a vote on preserving the fiscal integrity of Medicare. So those kinds of issues are you're going to see more of. You're going to see a lot more, I think, substantive debate. So even though it looks like a hopeless situation now, I think some good public knowledge is going to emerge from it. Concerning the economy itself, you may have heard this morning the fourth quarter numbers came in. They were negative. The economy has been had a negative for fourth quarter. Don't jump off a cliff on that one. Part of that was because of the way they do inventories, which artificially boosted the third quarter, artificially depressed the fourth quarter. But even if you parse the numbers, there's no question that the American economy still isn't gaining the kind of head of steam that you would expect. Normally, after a sharp downturn, the kind that we experienced in 2008 and 2009, normally you'd get a sharp upturn. And the question would become, how do you sustain it? None of you are old enough to remember the 1970s? Yeah, that's called pandering. I tried it in politics, didn't work, which is why I'm here today. Cadging free breakfast. But, hey, free soap too if you're in the room. But, but in the 1970s, you had 3 ever more severe recessions. Each one was followed by a sharp upturn, and the question became, could you sustain it? Well, the answer was no for a while, until the early 1980s, when the Reagan reforms kicked in, and we had a 20-year boom. This is the first time in American history where we've had a bad downturn, and at least initially, we didn't get a sharp uptick. Even in the Great Depression in the 1930s, when that finally bottomed out in 32, 33, you initially had a sharp upturn, wasn't sustainable, but at least you get that sharp upturn. This time we didn't get it. we've been sort of mulling along. We're like a car on a superhighway, should be going 70 miles an hour. Instead, we're puttering at 20, 30, 10, but never getting out of second gear. And the question is why? And this is something you have to be on the watch out for. I think what we're going through now is not the new normal, it's the new abnormal. It is not going to last. It's a result of policy errors. And the nice thing about policy errors is they are correctable, and they will be. So what are the things that are holding us back? What are the things you have to be on the watch out for? One of them, and I warn you in advance, and I hope you had plenty of coffee or tea at breakfast. Too bad they don't have it on the table. You're going to need it. The most critical thing holding us back today, and it is something that is totally underappreciated by economists, policymakers, politicos. It's an area called monetary policy. When you say the words monetary policy, which means interest rates, Federal Reserve, foreign exchange rates, Ben Bernanke, Alan Greenspan, I mean, the eyelids get heavy automatically. It is the most boring subject in the world. But if you don't get it right, even if you get other things right, you're going to have a troubled, turbulent economy. Be like a hospital, best surgeons in the world, best equipment in the world, best instruments in the world. If you don't have a clean hospital, if you don't understand germ theory, which they finally did starting in the 1850s, you're going to be in trouble. If they don't understand monetary policy, even if they get other things right, even if they get the spending right, the entitlements right, the taxes right, still going to have a troubled economy. And just to reward you in advance for what I'm about to do to you with this boring subject, let me give you a travel tip. If you ever find yourself in an airplane, in coach, middle seat, on the runway, watching your life pass away, and you want a little bit of elbow room with your seatmates, start talking about monetary policy. You'll have all the room you want. Or if any of you are single, or if friends or kids are single, and on a bad date and you want out, just start talking about monetary policy, and you'll never see that person again, guaranteed. But if you put aside all of the high fancy vocabulary, and economists do behave like many priesthoods, they come up with their own vocabulary more to intimidate than to enlighten. But strip away all the junk about monetary policy. It simply boils down to this. It's like an automobile or truck or whatever it is you drive. You can have a magnificent vehicle, but if you don't have sufficient fuel, you stall. Too much fuel, you flood the engine. Right amount, you have a chance to move forward. Same is true of monetary policy. The Federal Reserve does not supply enough money to meet the natural needs, organic needs of the economy. You're going to stall the thing. If it prints too much money, provides too much money, you get the economic equivalent of flooding the engine. Right amount, you have a chance to move forward. Long story short, the Federal Reserve has been on a bender since the early part of the last decade, creating too much money. And this is a huge thing, because when the Federal Reserve undermines, for whatever economic fallacious theory they engage in, I won't bore you with it, whenever they do that, bad things happen. Distorts the marketplace. It's like putting a virus in your computer. You can't trust the information anymore. And so starting with the early part of the last decade, they started to undermine the value of the dollar. And that's why you got the housing bubble. You could never have had a bubble, certainly on the scale that we experienced, if the Federal Reserve hadn't printed so much money. The juice would not have been there for it. When you have a weak dollar you can't trust the value of, what it means is investment gets misdirected. It goes into hard assets. You know, from the mid-1980s to the early part of the last decade, oil averaged $21 a barrel. What's it now? 95, 100, 110? Look at gold, $350, now $1,600, $1,700 an ounce. Look at farmland, more than doubled in recent years. Is that because suddenly people want a lot more food? That's part of it, but only part of it. You saw the same thing in the 1970s. Oil went from $3 a barrel to $40 a barrel. Inflation was finally conquered in the early 1980s. Oil crashed down to $10. then stabilized around $20, $25 a barrel. So investment gets misdirected. And this gets to what money is all about. Don't be intimidated by it. Money is simply a means of doing transactions with each other. You know, in days of old, we had barter before we had money. So, say 3,000 years ago, if I sold an ad in Forbes magazine, how would I get paid? Perhaps with a herd of goats. Let's say I wanted to buy iPads for our writers. So 3,000 years ago, if I went to the Apple store with my goats, the Apple store owner might say, well, I don't want goats, I want sheep. So then I have to figure out how to swap goats for sheep. Perhaps have to hire a sheep herder to make sure the wolves don't eat the sheep. Sheep herder wants to be paid in wine. I have red wine, he wants white wine. It just is very cumbersome. Money makes it easy, starting with Lydia 2,600 years ago, Athens. So you had coins, and then pieces of paper, now blips on a computer. But simply facilitates doing transactions with each other, makes investment much easier. Imagine today, if you went to the bank trying to deposit your herd of cows in an ATM. It just is very, or taking a pig out of an ATM. It just is very, very cumbersome procedure. And this way, when you do a transaction, you determine what you get in return. You sell something, you get the money, you determine what you get in the exchange. So it simply facilitates transactions. And if you understand that, then you can understand why you need a fixed value for money. So if you sell a bottle of wine for 4 gallons of gasoline, you get 4 gallons, not 3, not 5, you get 4. You know, it's commerce, fixed weights and measures. When you buy a pound of hamburger, it's 16 ounces, not 14, not 18, not 10. It doesn't float each day. Imagine what your life would be like if politicians, like the Fed, did to clocks what they do to the dollar. Imagine if they floated the clock. So if you have 60 minutes an hour one day, 48 minutes the next, 22 the next, 90 minutes the next, you'd soon have to have hedges, derivatives, futures, to figure out how many hours you're going to work next week. Let's say you hire somebody for $15 an hour. Now you have to figure out, is that an Arizona hour, Texas hour, Bangladesh hour? Becomes very cumbersome. Imagine what the standard of living in this country would be if each state had its own central bank. Each state issued its own currency. It would be chaotic. You leave Arizona, you go to California, you have to exchange your Arizona dollars for California dollars. You fly to New York, got to exchange for New York dollars. Delaware, same thing. That's why we've created the Constitution, have uniformity. So if you don't have money that can be relied upon to do these transactions, you make an investment in the future. If you don't know whether you're going to get back 100 cents on 100-cent dollars or 80-cent dollars or 20-cent dollars, it inhibits investment. So this critical area, which gets overlooked, what the Fed has done in terms of weakening the dollar, and they're about to go for another round, QE4 or QE40, whatever it is. They call it quantitative easing. All that means is they're shoveling out more money. QE, I was in England recently, and QE over there means Queen Elizabeth. And somebody said there, given what you guys are doing with the Fed, instead of calling QE like 4 or 3 or 5, why don't you call it Titanic 4, Titanic 5, given what you're doing to the dollar? But anyway, the Fed is about to do this again, and so it becomes very, very disruptive. And you never get a sustained recovery with a weak currency, because it makes transactions that much harder to do. So in terms of one of the key things that is holding us back is this whole area, most boring subject in the world, monetary policy. You got to have those fixed weights and measures. And what you see happening now is we know most new jobs in this economy are created by small businesses, medium-sized businesses. Then you hope they become bigger businesses. But right now, since you don't know what the real price of money is, the Federal Reserve has artificially suppressed interest rates. You know what that does? That makes it very easy for the government to borrow money, sort of deficit without tears. It's almost free money. But it also means, since you don't know what the real price of money is, if you don't know the real price of something, you're going to get less of it, is that it's much harder for small and medium-sized businesses to get credit. They may get a line of credit, but not as much as they want. And regulators now are camped out in banks today. Free office space they demand. Permanent, like having in-laws in permanently. You know, it makes you kind of uneasy. And so the regulators are camped out there, and any time a bank makes a loan to something other than something guaranteed by the government or the government itself, you have to paper that thing 6 ways to Sunday. You make a loan to a dry cleaner, you better have it papered over, because otherwise the regulators will gig you. So at the same time they say, why aren't the banks lending more money? They're also making it very difficult, especially for smaller banks to lend. That's one reason why small banks are in very deep trouble today. There's a small bank near our community, 5 people they had to hire just for compliance. A larger bank with about 160 billion in assets, the outgoing CEO told me recently, they had to hire 1,000 new people for compliance, which he says means several hundred fewer loan officers we can afford. So this kind of thing inhibits the economy. Got to get the money part right. Where is this going to lead? What's going to lead to is something that sounds very strange today, very strange, but it is going to unfold in the next 5 years. I say 5 years because that's long enough so you won't remember what I said. Lead busy lives. And if I'm right, I'll remind you in 5 years. And if I'm wrong, I'll say I was misquoted or taken out of context, you know. But in the next 5 years, I think something's going to happen. It'll sound very strange today, but we did it for the first 180 years of our existence as a country, and that is we're going to relink the dollar to gold. Why gold? Because more than any other item on this earth, it keeps its intrinsic value. When you see the price of gold fluctuate, that's not a fluctuation in the real value of gold as much as it is in the perceived market value of currencies. It means the dollar is going up and down, not gold. Gold is fixed. It's like Polaris, North Star, something you fix off of. It's worked for 4,000 years. We did it for 180 years in this country, worked pretty well. But again, if you don't have something that's fixed, it makes it much harder to do transactions in the marketplace. If you buy something, you don't know what it really weighs, you don't know how much liquid you're really getting. It makes it very hard to do commerce. So watch out on the monetary front. Another thing that's holding us back is one that is more readily understood and certainly is a contentious one, and that, of course, is taxes. The thing to recognize about taxes is taxes just don't raise revenue for government. They're also a price and a burden. Tax on income is the price you pay for working. Tax on profit, those of you who are in profit, is the price you pay for being successful. Tax on capital gains is the price you pay for taking risks that work out. And the idea is a very simple one. When you lower the price of good things like productive work, risk-taking success, you get more of them. Raise the price, you get less of them. So all of this talk about the need to raise taxes is absolutely counterproductive. Growth is the best way to deal with the deficit. If we had an economy today with normal growth, and we're in for a period of higher than average growth since we've been below average for 4 years now, 4.5 years, if you just had average growth, Washington would raise almost $500 billion more in revenue just from growth. That does about 40–50% of the deficit. Growth cures a lot of problems. So in terms of the tax side, raising tax rates would be counterproductive. And one of the reasons why we have a troubled global economy today is that for the first time since the 1930s, early 1930s, most countries are doing just the opposite. They're raising taxes. Southern Europe in a deep recession. Greece raising taxes on everything. Portugal raising taxes. Spain just raised their top tax rate to 52%, raising the equivalent of their national sales tax, value-added tax. Italy raising their value-added tax yet again, putting new taxes on homeowners. France, about to raise their top income tax rate to 75%. They wonder why all their top earners are moving to Belgium. Belgium, tax haven? Well, 50% is less than 75, so they're all moving to Belgium. And one even took Russian citizenship. You don't have to go that far. And then Germany. So they've all been raising taxes. Brits raised their capital gains tax from 18 to 28%. They wonder why they don't have a high-tech industry like we do. So they're all stagnating. Japan's even worse. Japan raised their top rate now to 55, just doubled their national sales tax from 5 to 10%, raising their capital gains tax, raising their inheritance tax, raising their payroll taxes. Japan's already in recession, like Southern Europe. We just went through a round of raising taxes. You may have noticed it in your Social Security tax. If you're a high-income earner, you may have noticed that. So everyone's committing the sin to varying degrees, in a scale not seen since the early 1930s. So that's why the global economy, key reason why the global economy is in trouble today. So but fortunately, I think that is going to turn. That tide is going to turn. You're seeing it on the state level in this country. Yes, some states like California, which raise taxes, Illinois, if you take the word Greece and translate it in English, you get Illinois. But you can tell this is not Chicago. But a lot of states are doing just the opposite. I come from New Jersey. We just cut our top income tax rate there. But other states are actually trying to get rid of their income taxes. Take states like Kansas. They just reduced their income taxes, hope to get rid of their income tax. Oklahoma, same thing. Louisiana is proposing to get rid of their state income tax because research is coming out showing that states with low or no state income tax do better than states with higher income taxes, not just for one small period, but over time, decades. Trends are very clear where you go with that. So on the state level, that's starting to change. New governor of North Carolina hopes to reduce the state's income tax, which is one of the highest in the Southeast, if not the highest. So on the state level, you start to see changes coming. And on the national level, even though it's not going to happen in the next 4 years perhaps, although things might change, what you're starting to see unfold is a consensus emerging. The consensus is, and you saw it with the Simpson-Bowles Commission, which was appointed by President Obama a couple of years ago to deal with the deficit. Democrats and Republicans on that commission bought into the idea of removing some of the clutter in the tax code and reducing tax rates across the board. Didn't go nearly as far as I would like, but the idea is out there. Simplify the code, lower tax rates. So I think, even though it looks hopeless today, I think, and again, in future years, you're going to see a drastic simplification of the tax code. I'd like to do a flat tax, if you just put it in perspective, how bad this thing has become, which is why I think this consensus is emerging. Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address is all of 272 words, defined the character of the American nation. Our Declaration of Independence, about 1,300 words. Constitution, all the amendments, a little over 7,000 words. The Bible, which took centuries to put together, 773,000 words. Now, the Federal Income Tax Code and all the attendant rules and regulations, not just the code itself, but all the junk that goes with it, 9 million words and rising. And nobody knows what's in it. The IRS doesn't know. You call their hotline. A fourth of the time they give you the wrong answer, hold you responsible. They don't know what's in it. You don't have to go to the Amazon to find exotic creatures. They're crawling around in this code. It's been amended 14,000 times in the last 25 years, 14,000 changes. It is beyond redemption. I think the consensus is going to grow. There's only one thing to do with this monster, and that is to take this beast, kill it, drive a stake through its heart, bury it, and hope it never rises again. Just start all over again. Start over. And if you did that, start over, replace it with something like a flat tax, single rate with generous exemptions for adults and for children. 25 countries have done it already, including most in Central and Eastern Europe. I put out a plan, and there are other plans out there, proposals, But you could have exemptions where a family of 4 would pay no federal income tax on their first $46,000 of income, free of federal income tax, only 17% above anything above $46,000, no tax on savings, and no death tax. You know, I've always believed you should be allowed to leave the world unmolested by the IRS. You pay enough during your lifetime. Or as our founders would say, no taxation without respiration. And so we'll see if it comes to something as simple as that, but the idea is out there, and you're going to start to see more proposals made in Congress. I think the public would buy into it right away. You know, the IRS told us last year we spent 6.5 billion hours filling out tax forms. For what reason? Equivalent of 3 million full-time jobs. So that's one of the big obstacles. But even for all the talk of raising taxes today, I think you're going to get an environment where big changes, positive changes are coming. On the spending side, once you understand that money does not come from heaven, money does not come from Mars, it comes from you. You create money, not governments, not central banks. You create money, as we discussed earlier, by doing transactions with each other. That's where the real wealth trading comes from, you doing things. Once you understand that, then you understand that when governments do stimulus spending, that takes it from you, either through taxing, borrowing, or printing of money, which is another form of taxation. So that's not stimulus. We tried it in the 30s, didn't work. Japan's been doing this for 20 years. Look where they are today. Once one of the most vibrant economies in the world, been dead in the water for 2 decades. So in terms of spending, you just have to have some restraint. Restraint with a sound dollar, sensible tax code, you get growth. A lot of these problems become more soluble, believe me. And talking about entitlements, which gets to health care. First, quickly on Social Security. The answer for that is, thankfully, we have enough wealth in the nation to pay benefits for everyone who's on the system, about to go on the system. The system gets in trouble with younger people. The system crashes. So for younger people, why not introduce a new system where the bulk of those payroll taxes go to their own personal accounts with sensible rules on diversity and regulation so they can't do crazy things. You can't buy race horses and junk like that. Very simple, vanilla stuff. You do that and you start to turn over time a liability into an asset. As my generation goes on to their ultimate reward, you have a system that's creating capital instead of destroying it. As for health care, ask yourselves, you're living with it each day, why do we have a health care crisis in this country? The simple answer is people like me are getting older, we want more health care, keeps going up in price, the system implodes. But ask yourself, why is the demand for health care considered a crisis when demand for anything else in this economy is considered a huge opportunity? If people want more apps, California, Silicon Valley, and others, glad to help you out. People want more cars, Detroit and other manufacturers, glad to help you out. You want more coffee, Starbucks and others, glad to help you out. So why is healthcare demand considered a disaster instead of a huge growth opportunity? And the answer is, if we step back, as much of healthcare we don't have traditional, real free markets. This grew out of World War II, price controls. I won't bore you with the history of it. We have a crazy hybrid system today, a disconnect between providers and consumers, third party, whether it's employers, government, health insurers, it's third party. So the system doesn't work as well as it should. And so the answer is, I think, going forward, is to do in healthcare what we do with food. Food, as you know, is more basic than healthcare. No food, no nothing. We don't have government-run agriculture. If we did, we'd have no more obesity. We'd all be starving. You know, they tried it in Russia and China. It did not work out very well. And so why can't we make changes in the system? And I think this is going to come, where you get more entrepreneurship, more patient control, and more effective safety nets. You know, in food, we have agriculture produce the food, companies process the food, truckers and others deliver the food, everyone from hotels, grocery stores, supermarkets sell the food. People have a problem getting it. We have everything from food banks to food stamps to deal with it. Why in the world can't we have a similar system in health care? There are a lot of steps that can move towards it. For example, nationwide shopping for health insurance. I live in New Jersey. We have a lot of crazy regulations there. I can buy a perfectly good family health insurance policy in neighboring Pennsylvania at half the price than I do in New Jersey, third of the price in Wisconsin. Yet I'm not allowed to do it. I can buy a car in Pennsylvania, buy a shirt or house in Pennsylvania, can't buy the insurance. Have nationwide shopping, have hundreds of companies compete for it. Open it up. Taxes. As you know, if you're a business, you get a deduction. If you're self-employed, you get a deduction. But if you're not, you pay with after-tax dollars. Why not equalize the system? So if you don't like what your employer offers, you go out and have a competitive market and get a deduction for it, like every other business does. Equalize may make it easier for people to pool together in affinity groups to get insurance. A lot of positive things can be done to open the thing up and get the kind of accountability you're working on so you get better decision making, more procedures. Because technology, as you know, is creating extraordinary opportunities in healthcare. We had a healthcare conference in December. One of the stories we heard was a youngster, 1-year-old, had a certain kind of rare cancer, extremely rare. Because they had done genomics on this infant, they were able to find a gene that they could work on and save that kid who normally would have died. That only worked with that one person, not going to work with anyone else. That kind of individual care and being able to come up with solutions for each individual sounds kind of semi-utopian today, not as much as it did 5 years ago. But that is going to be coming more and more as we find out more and more about how the body works. Remember Vioxx taken off the market because a lot of people had side effects? That won't happen in the future. You'll be able to know in advance. Is that going to work with you? No. With another person, it would. So why this one-size-fits-all? So you're going to see a lot of turbulence, not just from what happened in the health care bill, which has already been changed. Class Act, as you know, is out. 1099 requirements out. There are going to be a lot of other changes coming. This thing is just beginning. And you know what's going to help push it? Think of this, is medical tourism. Not Singapore or Panama or India, but Indian reservations. That's how we got casinos mushrooming in this country. That is sovereign territory. And so the things that may block something in one area, you can go to a reservation and you got a whole different set of rules and laws. And so you're going to see extraordinary new ways of coming up. How do we do things better? So as has happened in my industry, media industry, extraordinary things are coming up. Extraordinary changes have taken place in media. They're also going to do it in healthcare. You're in the cusp of it. You're right in the middle of it. Some of it's going to be turning your stomach. Your eyes are going to be rolling. Others are going to be very, very exciting and very, very positive. And so you're right at the cusp of it. Why? Because healthcare is ultimately personal. And so what you're doing now is just the beginnings of extraordinary and I think ultimately positive things to come. Human beings, what we are, when we always look back, we say, it's obvious. Why didn't they think of that? Well, it's not obvious until you try it, until you do things, see what works, what doesn't work. That's what markets are all about. See what works and what doesn't work. Same thing is unfolding in healthcare. It's not going to be European-style one-payer system. It's not going to be the system that we had. That was not going to be sustainable. But it's going to be something emerging wholly new here. And ultimately, I think, very exciting, very entrepreneurial, and ultimately means a lot of us are going to be around for a lot longer. Thank you very much. Now we have time for questions. Feel free to raise your hand, and they have microphones.
Mr. Forbes, given the nation's debt where we are now, and the fact that, as you mentioned, the printing of more money, do you see a time where the world is going to a different predominant currency other than the U.S. dollar? And if so, then what can we do to prepare?
In a global economy, you need a global currency. It's not invented by governments or central banks. It rises up from the marketplace, whether it's Spanish silver, the British pound, now the US dollar. It's just a matter of convenience. And because the dollar was seen as sound, was one of the reasons why we grew so rapidly, is it became the global currency. And most countries, one way or the other, try to fix to the dollar just because it makes it easier to do trade. So to move away from the dollar, and this is why countries are so angry and frustrated, is short term, you can't move away from the dollar. So if the dollar gets in trouble as it did in the 1970s, you've got real, it's not just our problem, it's the whole world's problem. So yeah, if we continue to undermine the dollar, other arrangements will begin to be made. Other currencies will emerge. But it's a long-term process. So I think the easiest thing, ultimately, I think you're going to maybe see another country move to a gold standard, and then others will imitate it. But ultimately, I think we've got to get our act together, which is not that hard to do. You say gold, and people think, "Oh my God, are you going to go in the hills with a machine gun and cans of food and all that kind of stuff?" No, all it means is, like again, you have 60 minutes an hour. All it means is to pick a price. For illustrative purposes, pick $1,500. Because gold is fixed in value, all that $1,500 means is that if it goes much above $1,500 in the marketplace, that means you're printing too much money. So you stop. If it goes much below $1,500, it means you're not printing enough money to meet the needs of the marketplace. So you print some more. So it's like the fuel injector. And when you do it right, it works seamlessly. A Nobel Prize-winning economist said monkeys could run the system. That's not good for self-esteem for economists, so I will say high school students could run the thing. Seriously, the concept's very, very simple. So once we get over this theory that manipulating money is the way to wealth, which is like saying manipulating clocks is the way to wealth, no, it's just very disruptive. Once we get over that, and experience is a hard teacher on that, then we will go to what we did for almost 200 years and what the world has done on and off for 3,000 years. We will stabilize the thing. So yes, if we continue on the current course, it will be chaos, but the thing about cliffs is if you see a cliff coming, you usually stop before you go over it. Usually. Yes?
Thanks, Mr. Ford. I was just wondering if you've joined a Medicare ACO yet. I'm just kidding. The question I was curious your opinion is the difference between, say, the agriculture industry and healthcare is the lack of knowledge of the consumer to make prudent choices in healthcare. For example, 90% of the patients that visit an emergency room don't know what drugs are on, or most people can't really determine what kind of services they need for their health problems because it's so darn complicated. What are your thoughts about applying market-based techniques to that kind of an industry where the consumer really isn't knowledgeable of the specifics that they need?
Well, the whole point of markets is you can specialize in a particular area. You don't have to know about anything else. Let's say you're an accountant. You don't have to know about agronomy or physics to buy a car or to buy food. But what it also means, though, is in terms of buying insurance, people very, very quickly become knowledgeable of what is there and what isn't there. 3 million people work or retired, it's over 3 million, from the federal government. If you work for the federal government, you have your choice of 200 to 300 different health insurance policies each year in the program they have. And it works. You pick what meets your particular needs. So if it works for 3 million in the federal sector, it can work for 300 million nationally. You don't want to know anything about it, you pick a plan and you go with the flow. Fine, your choice. But if we're particularly among younger people in this day and age, People are learning more about what choices they have. So I don't have to be a physician to know I'm not on Medicare yet. I'm still working. I'm still with a company that has a plan. But I certainly would probably lean more to one of the Advantage plans than I would the traditional kind. And what do I know about medicine? My wife will tell you very little. But I can make a choice on insurance. And when you get a real market in insurance and you get real people start to control their resources on health care, then the marketplace provides information. You see it, for example, in LASIK surgery. Because you write the check for it, providers have every incentive to make it more attractive to you, more wholesome for you, better for you. So in real terms, that process today costs less than it did 10 years ago. Cosmetic surgery. I know that's not the emergency room, maybe, but in cosmetic surgery in the last 15 years has grown sixfold in this country, and huge technological advances. But unless it's a result of disease or accident, you're the consumer. So if you want a procedure done, what do? Well, if you have friends who can keep their mouths shut, you might ask them for advice. But you scope the thing out, and you haven't had the kind of inflation there that you've had in the rest of healthcare. And so in our company, for example, we give our people $2,500 cash during the course of the year for medical expenses. And once you have it, it's yours. If you want to spend $2,000 on a gold tooth, go right ahead. It's yours. But what that does in a little way, we have a high deductible plan, we're allowed to do it, is that suddenly if you save money on a drug, it's money in your pocket, not mine, not the insurer, not the government, it's yours. So suddenly you pay, if you wish, a lot more attention, because those resources are yours, and you'll husband them, you'll deal them usually better than a third party will. And so, yeah, it can work. Every industry is different, but free market principles, I think, can apply. And then when you go to the emergency room, sure, you're not going to say, I'll do this, I'll do that. It's an emergency. But in terms of insurance, you buy that in advance. In terms of arrangements you want to make, you do that in advance. So you make those choices. You don't have to be a physician. And people want more. Now it's routine when you go to a lot of physicians today to be told and walk through what's involved and what your choices are and make a decision. I had prostate cancer a year and a half ago. Several things you can do. And they walked me through, and I made a decision. But yeah, if you don't want to make a decision, let somebody else, you can. But if you want to take more control, you can. We live in an era where a lot of people, especially younger people, do know how to access, do want more control, ask questions. And you'll get different kinds of delivery on health care. There was an example several years ago. I would never do this, but some people did. Some specialists decided to do what you might call an Oprah practice. That is, they'd bring 8 or 10 patients in at once. Not very enlightening. I see the lights are going down. But we have to go. But just to finish up on that, 8 to 10 people for several hours. Now, often when you go in for an appointment, it's very rushed. You know, the doc's under pressure, you're under pressure, sort of a rushed feeling. Here, it's very relaxed. You give yours. You want to have others hear it, fine. You give yours, others give theirs. But it's a relaxed atmosphere. Now, the specialist loves it because doing 8 to 10 patients at a clip ends up saving his or her time. And the patients loved it if they didn't mind revealing everything, having everyone hear it, because if you thought of something an hour later, you could pipe up and say, what about this? Now, not for everybody, but that's the kind of variety you're going to see in the future. So in terms of your own business, you're going to see consolidation, but I also think you're also going to see more boutiques growing up as well. It's going to be a wide open thing. Well, I see the time is up, and before Tommy has to come up and pull me off, I will say thank you very much and good luck to you. Thank you.